Welcome to Ascent Insider, where we explore strategies, tactics, and stories that help businesses thrive in today's dynamic world. I'm Gayana, your co-host for today's episode. Today we have a very special guest, Vishy, the CEO of Ascent Business Solutions. And today we'll be discussing something very interesting and crucial on every business leader's mind. That is managing risk through uncertain times.
How do you prepare your business to handle unexpected disruptions? How do you protect against sudden market changes while continuing to grow? Vishy's leadership experience makes him the perfect person to help us understand how to safeguard our business when uncertainty is the only certainty. Vishy, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Before we dive into our topic, Vishy, could you please give us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your journey here at Ascent?
So I've been working with different organizations over the last 20 years across the globe. Right? I've done transformation at scale, I've done outsourcing, I've done consulting, design implementation, risk management, strategy, you name it, right? We are people say we are an outsourcing company. I see ourselves as a technology company which is enabling outsourcing, right? And the outcomes that our customers are seeking. So that's a little bit about me, right?
So let's start by defining the concept of risk. When we talk about managing risk, it can mean a lot of different things depending on the context. From your perspective, how should businesses understand and frame risk, especially during uncertain times?
Sure. I think it's a great question, right? Risk is an inherent part of any business, right? Every business that operates around an ecosystem that can go south anytime, right? So when we look at risk, what kind of risk can really occur, right? It can be financial risk, it can be credibility risk or reputational risk. It can be external risk, because when we look at it, right, last 4 years have been very, very, I would say from a business perspective, it might have been the most volatile 4 years, starting from COVID to all the geopolitical conflicts that we've been seeing. Demand and supply has been all over the place. So if you look at it, right, risk can present itself in various kind of form, right? What you can do is you can build an ecosystem where you can make your organization more resilient. An ecosystem would mean how much digital are you, what's your spread of risk, how do you operate when a risk presents itself, what is the framework that you have created, right? All of that will come into play when the risk presents itself, and how equipped are the people and the employees, right, which kind of makes up the organization to face that risk, right?
Like you clearly mentioned, it's very important to recognize various forms of risks. Could you share how Ascent identify, assess, and prioritize risks?
Yeah. See, as an organization, we assess our risk in a very similar way, like I mentioned, right? We look at reputational risk, we look at financial risks, we look at external risks, which can be competitor risk, it can be the market conditions and so on, right? But when we do business with our customers, there is also an element of risk that we undertake, right? It can be what kind of infrastructure are we working in, what kind of data are we working on, where is the data hosted, right? What's the criticality of that data for the customer? It can be somebody's personal information, it can be customer information, it can be a sales register, it can be various things, like. So from that perspective, it is important for us as an organization to also create a framework to identify these risks as we go in, not only to protect ourselves but also to protect our customers, right? And the customers of our customers, right? Who are the end customers. So we have a framework where we assess or self-assess the risk on every contract or every customer that we do business with, right? And we try to mitigate that risk through that framework proactively, right? So we don't get into a situation where we end up, having a data breach, or we end up having some kind of a problem, right, which impacts our customers, right? So that framework has been created based on the tenets like data privacy, financial risk for the customer, and so on, right? So that's a very robust framework.
Okay, Vishy, that's very thoughtful and insightful. So once you've identified the risks, and the next step is managing them. So what are some fundamental components of an effective risk management framework, like you mentioned just now, that businesses should be thinking about? Sure.
The first step, like I said, once you create the framework, or you create an ERM, as we call it, as ERM stands for Enterprise Risk Management, right? We understand the appetite of any organization. How much risk do you really want to undertake? The risk is there, right? I mean, and in business, too much risk or too less risk, both are on the two extreme side of the pedestal, right? So we have to understand what is the risk that we are undertaking, why are we undertaking, does that fit into our appetite or our risk management framework, right? And basis that, what is our identification management, right? Like there are some risk areas, like we mentioned, right? Talent can be another risk areas, right? How do you protect your talent? So once you have these levels or these areas kind of formed up, the threshold that you can, thresholds that you can really get to. Beyond that, it becomes red, right? And then you have that metricized, and then you start managing it, right? So you are constantly reviewing yourself against these thresholds, right? And then that becomes your process of risk management. Every time something comes closer to that threshold, you have an action plan, you have mitigation. So I'll give you an example, right? Like for example, if you are losing a lot of your high potential employees within your employee base, right? That is a risk that you are seeing clearly, right? And that will start impacting your business sooner or later. So you now create your strategy around how do you retain, that employees based on market condition. It can be reward differentiation, it can be work-life balance, it can be different things, right? Because aspirations for individuals are different, right? So, but you can create a strategy, a holistic strategy that kind of enables that kind of risk management. Yeah. So these are some of the ways to, this time, and what I'm going to say is maybe not going to be enough, right, for us to cover everything, right? But these are some of the ways to proactively manage your risk.
So Vishy, if we look at the Ascent's journey, I think they have been through some challenging times. What are some of the strategies that you have put in place to mitigate and manage risks?
Yeah, like I mentioned, first thing first, if we know what kind of risk is relevant, then you identify the thresholds, then you create a risk mitigation plan, you create an assessment plan to to metricize that risk and to constantly review that risk. And then you create within the business, you create people who are responsible and accountable for these risks, right? Like for example, the CFO is responsible for financial risk. A CIO is responsible for data security risk, right? A CEO is responsible for everything. So that way you create people who are accountable for these risks, which is what we did. And the review mechanism in the governance, sometimes what doesn't present itself very often is considered to be not important. But the fact is, you have to be constantly ready for something which maybe is not going to occur today, it's not going to occur tomorrow, it's going to occur maybe a year down the line. But you have to constantly be ready. I think that sometimes becomes very difficult because risk is not constantly visible to the naked eye. Right? It gets what is visible is our core tasks or core activities or our core operations, because we are doing it day in, day out. So thinking about risk while doing it and perceiving it is the difficult bit. That is the enforcement of culture that we need. Organizations that are able to enforce that as a culture in the activity that people are doing, kind of integrated, are the organizations that are very successful. They're very adaptable. They are very, very agile. Agility is very, very critical in any environment where there is risk, right? Like COVID, people shifted from work from office, which was never, heard of, right? I mean, work from office to work from home overnight. Technology like internet connectivity scaled up overnight, right? I mean, over a period of, because the usage went up drastically, right? All of this was never expected, but it was the agility of the people, agility of the organization, agility of the organization that was providing that kind of ecosystem that enabled the mitigation of that risk. Because it became an imperative. It just couldn't work if we were not going to do that, right?
Exactly.
Families adapted to that culture as well, right? I mean, as you would know and you would have seen, to that families adapted, our kids adapted to that culture. So, I feel once it becomes imperative and you perceive it as high risk, you automatically start becoming very agile.
That's very true, Vishy. Couldn't agree more on the working from home situation also. So in these times of uncertainty, Vishy, resilience becomes just as important as risk mitigation. So how can businesses build resilience to be better prepared for unexpected disruptions?
So there are a lot of concepts, traditional as new age concepts, right? And frameworks. Like businesses traditionally have been operating with a business continuity plan to test their resilience, right? Resilience is nothing but operating at a level where your business doesn't get disrupted in an event where a risk presents itself, right? So if you know what your top risks are, you will have some bit of mitigation pre-planned, right? Like for example, businesses with their business continuity plan, right? And there are different levels, right, of business continuity plan. But let's say if there is rain, common one, right? If there is rain and there is floods, right, within your office premises or within your location, work from home becomes a sort of a resilience activity or action that you are going to take, right? Similarly, if certain systems are not working, right? And I'm being very, very probably transactional. If there are systems are not working, you tend to work offline, and then when the system starts working, you tend to, put in the data back, right, into the system. You're doing all of that because that's an inbuilt resilience that has been created in the ways of working, right? And so that's some part of it. But there are some strategic resilience, like you can have a disaster recovery plan, right? Which means if your data centers go down, where do you move, right? If there is if you get hacked on a specific data center, how do you reconnect? What kind of actions do you really need to take, right? What kind of cleansing you need to take? All of that is pre-planned, right? So resilience comes. What is a preventive resilience? So you kind of continue to do phishing tests. You continue to do all of the good stuff to educate, to avoid a risk to present itself, right? Through all the frameworks, to all the action plans that you have. Resilience also presents itself when the actual risk kind of comes through. How quickly are you able to address it, right? Which is again organizational culture, what kind of ecosystem that you have created, how much have you invested, right? Like for example, if a customer wants a business continuity of, let's say, 30% of their work to be continued, certain activities to be continued, you can build as business continuity at home. You can build it into a different city. You can build it into a different country, right? All of these are investments that any organization need to make based on how critical they see these actions, right? So I think it's a pretty broad topic, right? But again, resilience is the way I would define it is how integrated it is with your day-to-day work. I think that's the best way to kind of put it. And then obviously, how much investment can you really make to make yourself resilient?
So my next question, Vishy, I think you partially touched upon it, on technology. How do we use technology to manage risk? In your context, what are the new tools, techniques that you have used in terms of mitigating risks at Ascent?
Yeah. See, some of the and technology will continue to evolve, right? So you have preventive kind of actions that you take, and then obviously, so some of the preventive actions will be like a DLP, just like a data protection of the emails that go in. Are you sending out any kind of sensitive information out, right, for a data breach? Or it can be data phishing. It can be it can be what we did was we kind of centralized all our risks into a single platform, right? And we created a framework which will send notifications as and when the risk, the risk would slightly go up or be closer to the threshold. So people can start now thinking of, okay, it's time for us to kind of take actions, right? But yeah, in today's world, digitization is probably the key word for you to de-risk yourself through this, work from anywhere. You've seen, we were on, like 20 years, 30 years ago, we were on-prem. Today, on-prem is like unheard of, right? I mean, everybody's on the cloud. So in today's world, infrastructure, how is your infrastructure set up? Is it really resilient, right? Because if it gets flooded and it's, if your data center gets flooded and it's an on-prem kind of server, right? Connectivity, then you've lost the connectivity because you'll have to shut down at some point in that. Whereas if it's a cloud, you can stay connected, right? Just imagine you're connected to the cloud and you're at home. And you are now spread, your entire workforce is spread across, thousands and lakhs of kilometers. The risk automatically is now getting distributed. That's another example of resilience, by the way. Yeah. Right? That's how technology will help you distribute your risk.
That's very insightful again, Vishy. So, navigating towards market changes. Market is always evolving. So, sometimes even unexpectedly. Example, the COVID. So, what should businesses be doing to stay ahead of market changes and turn potential risks into opportunities?
I think again a great question. See, we need to constantly be in touch of reality, right? If you created a product, I've spoken to CEOs who created a product more years ago, right? Stayed with the same product, right? And today, when you have artificial intelligence coming into play, they suddenly are feeling, they're suddenly feeling more pressurized. They're feeling, okay, the product that I've been selling and which is the core of my business might become irrelevant, right? And now they are suddenly trying to outpace everybody, suddenly try to rush, which kind of puts a very immense kind of pressure on the employees, on the infrastructure, right? Because speed comes at a cost. Speed always comes at a cost. It can be work life of your employees, it can be investments, right? So, for you to stay ahead of everybody, you have to first look at what is changing around you and how frequently is it changing. What are some of the emerging technology that is coming into play, right? And you need to figure out what is the meaningful way of using that technology, right? But if you continue to work in a very traditional way or in traditional environment, you will become irrelevant. There are enough and more examples in the world that organizations that have not been able to adapt to changes, customer preferences, have become, obsolete after some time, right? The Kodak roll is a great example. I don't know if you remember it.
Yes.
It's a great example. We don't see it anymore, right? And it's 30 years, I guess. It's completely obsolete, right? Look at, companies that were creating analog phones. Like, let's say Nokia was a pioneer with the cell phones as it started, right? Today it's still catching up, right? BlackBerry, for example, right? There's so many examples, right? So it is important that you might have created a product or a service to meet a certain requirement, but that requirement is also evolving because consumer preferences are evolving. What people at a certain age might like, another age category might not like, right? Like if you have people who are over 70 and if you have people over, the Gen Zs, right? If I look at my parents, they love to read newspaper. But today, the consumption of news is so kind of digitized, right? So again, what I'm saying is it will get obsolete as consumer preferences are changing. So if you cannot stay in touch with the reality and how times and preferences are changing and keep yourself relevant in the market scenario, you will become obsolete, right? So that's the difficult truth.
So my next question is somewhat similar. Could you give an example where Ascent had to pivot or adjust to market changes and how it played out?
Yeah. So when we started off, right, we started off as a pure play offshoring company, right, on an outsourcing company. The play was very simple. Somewhere the work is being done at a higher cost, we will give you the same work and output at a lower cost. Right. So, to the extent that, labor arbitrage was the only, value prop or business case that we would create on. Right? Slowly and steadily, we saw that organizations that were doing it, their expectations, because they also have, like everybody, they also have their budgets and cuts and reductions code, right? They started expecting more and more from the organizations that they were outsourcing to, right? So then you started seeing an evolution of how do you insert technology, how do you generate value, how do you assure quality, how do you assure compliance, how do you assure predictability. Then you started seeing SLAs, you started seeing measurements, you started seeing technology insertion, you started seeing automation at scale, you started seeing analytics to generate insights to provide value, right? And you started, now the entire conversation today, if I talk to the client, is mostly value-based conversation rather than, and when I say value, it's not cost arbitrage anymore, but value that we can deliver for you based on the data that you are posting with us, or the accesses that you are providing to us, where we can get that data and we can provide you, we can kind of automate something and give you a lower turnaround time, or a higher capacity because of the automation that we have done, right? Better visualization, better experience, analytics to take decisions which will kind of add to your bottom line. So today, Ascent really focuses on value-based discussions at a low cost. So we are not really very heavy on your pocket, but at the same time we deliver value to you. Value which will resonate with you, value that would be relevant to you, value that will really, really impact and be visible to you.
Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation, Vishy. So before we wrap up, could you summarize a few key takeaways for business leaders who want to make sure their organizations are prepared for uncertainty and risk?
I think it's a summary of the entire conversation. I would say be relevant in the market and to the customer. Understand what risk means to your organization, because for every organization, risk and thresholds are different based on the appetite of the organization, right? Create a mitigation and management plan and see how you can integrate that into the daily life of people, right? Without making them conscious or without putting more workload on them, but make that a part of your culture, right? And finally, I would say be digitally relevant, because today the market is moving at such a fast pace, and you can react much better if you are digital, if you are focused on data, you're taking decisions based on data. I think a lot of things in the past where people were taking decisions on gut, and and there were some really, really great men who built large businesses based on gut and luck. Today, I think data is the king, and if you are able to use that to your advantage, then you will always be ahead of the competition, right? So that's pretty much it.
Fantastic advice, Vishy. Thank you so much for being here, taking the time to share your experience with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, Vishy, for joining with us today. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, this is Achela.
And this is Gayana, signing off from Ascent Insider.